Okay, we're recording.
Awesome. Joe, thanks so much for having me on your show today.
Hey, yeah, no problem. No problem. I can't, I'm always like, who's a real interesting person to chat with? And like, you're always at the very, top of that list.
Well, right back at you, Joe. I feel the same way. That's symbiotic, right?
Yes, yes, yes. And, I've done like video stuff with you and things like that. You know, so when are you going to do something real stupid and invite me?
Well, you come on and do a video. Let's what do they call that? Sort of a cross platforms. You know what I mean? Let's do it. The comic books do that all the time, don't they?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Like Spider-Man teams up with Batman or whatever, like Marvel DC crossover. Let's do it.
Right. Yeah, exactly, exactly. Okay, so what kind of stuff have you been up to?
Oh man. Well, obviously if we look at, you know, the past year, it's been a lot of pioneering things. I think we've both been in the same boat where, all the things that we were doing, they went on hiatus and we had to adapt, right? So, teaching online, performing online, remote collaborations, like we did the Towels Top videos there.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah,
so, I think in that way, it's a good conversation because, then I saw you at my birthday party. I'll tell you, I
yeah.
turned 50. Normally, you'd want to have all these people in the room with you, and it's a milestone. But obviously, that wasn't safe this year. I guess, Joe, it seems like there's probably, one way you could break people down is that on one hand, there's people that at the start of the pandemic, they figured, okay, let's wait, right?
Yeah.
And, it's got to go back to normal sooner or later. And those people, they got to be going out of their minds right now because it's still not back to normal. I kind of feel like, Joe, you and I are the same in that both of us embraced the idea about, well, let's pioneer new ways of doing. Like, neither of us, I think, are into the idea of waiting around for stuff, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. No, I've been busier this past year than I've ever been.
Right. And I think a big part of that, Joe, is your willingness to pioneer, and it's. I'll say this about that busy thing too. Here's something I think about, Joe, is either you or I could plug a Stratocaster into a wah wah and a fuzz face into a Marshall. We could do that, and it's awesome. But the thing is that when Jimi Hendrix did that, he was pioneering something. And
Right.
we can learn from that and take inspiration from that. But if you or I play through Hendrix's gear, we're not really adding something new to history by doing that. The stuff that we did in the past year, though, we really did, because this stuff, even once the pandemic is all gone, there's going to be more and more remote applications going on, I think, for the rest of human history. So I see this as, the bright side, the silver lining. We got in on the ground floor. We were able to do some of this stuff in the very beginning. So to me,
Right.
that gets me excited about it.
Right. Yeah. It kind of makes me think like, there's that saying that like some people like embrace the future and some people are dragged into the future kicking and screaming.
Right. Yeah, you're absolutely right. And then the way I see it, though, is if we resisted the future's going to come either way. And
Right.
I figure I think we'll get more out of our lives by if we see the tide is turning, get on the cutting edge. Get on the cutting edge of that. To me, that's what seems to make more sense. That's what Jimi Hendrix did. I'll say that.
Yeah.
That's what Eddie Van Halen did. Eddie Van Halen wasn't like, oh no, I don't know about this Floyd Rose. You know what I mean? He wasn't. He embraced it. And I
Right.
think the people that change history are the people. They're not the ones that go into it kicking and screaming, right? They're the people that actually they're setting the trends for the
Yeah.
future.
Yeah. Okay. So you know what? Let me ask you about Eddie Van Halen and the Floyd Rose.
Yes.
I've always looked at it that although he used the Floyd, the locking, the whole thing, he wasn't really using it to its fullest potential at all because he had it decked.
Couldn't pull it up.
Right. And that's the whole thing about the Floyd, because, people use the standard Fender tremolo system, non-locking, and as long as you deck it and everything, it stays in tune really well.
Well, let me add there. There's a lot of things you can do. I set my stock Fender tremolo so you can pull up on them.
Yeah.
And no tremolo is going to stay in tune automatically. You have to take steps to make sure that's going to happen. But yeah, I can keep a stock Fender tremolo in tune. And those first 6 Van Halen albums, he wasn't using the Floyd in the studio. He was still using stock Fender tremolo.
Yeah.
But I agree. There you go. This is no disrespect to Eddie Van Halen, but you could certainly set the tremolo up so it's floating, and then just choose not to pull up on the bar, and all those.
Right.
I'd make the argument though that if you, as you described it, if you deck it, if you put a 1971 quarter,
right.
you do something, you will. Let's see. You're going to have more range if you can't pull up on the bar. You're going to have more range going down. Maybe that would be the one advantage that I'd say to decking it. This sounds counterintuitive, but if I'm not using a lock nut, which I haven't used the guitar with a lock nut since 1997. And if I'm not using a lock nut, I have better luck keeping the guitar in tune if the bridge is floating.
Really?
Right? Yeah, really. Well, let me say this. The wood on the guitar that the bridge is connecting with, it's not a spring.
Mm-hmm.
There is springiness to wood.
Yeah.
If you make contact with the wood, then you move away and you make contact and you're relying on the wood, again, to behave as a backstop. I do feel like sometimes it'll dig in a little bit more, other times a little bit less. Whereas if it's a floating tremolo and you really get the balance between the string gauge and the springs holding the tremolo together, it's just it's different for everybody. That's one thing.
Yeah.
What works for one person might not work for another. But in my experience, I have better luck keeping tremolos in tune when they're floating. How about you?
Interesting.
Yeah, what do you say?
I totally agree with like the wood having a little bit of kind of give to it. And I've tried a bunch of different things, including stuffing a little washer under there, and I find the best thing that works, because I have mine just decked, is when I'm done with it, I just give it a quick yank up.
Right. Well, I think you have to do that no matter what. And I almost want to say, we talk about that yank up. I think that the way that you handle the tremolo bar is going to have a tremendous effect, whether it's a Floyd or a stock tremolo. If you make, I'm going to use the term jerky motions. If you make jerky motions with the tremolo, it's going to get caught someplace. Now, if it does get caught, you're right. The other thing I'd say, sometimes a pull up, yes. Other times, sometimes the string will go a little bit sharp, and you just bend the string, and there you go. It's back in tune.
Pops it back down. Right. Yeah. Exactly.
I kind of
all the tricks.
Absolutely. And I say this thing about using the tremolo bar is that it is inherently risky. And I love that. I love, to me, performing music where nothing can go wrong, I should have just been a doctor or a lawyer at that point. I don't know. It's like, it's not as exciting. To me, it's exciting knowing, hey, if I break a string, my guitar is going to go way out of tune. Well, I think that probably affects the energy that you're putting out, knowing that you're walking out. It's like, to use Van Halen, live without a net is the idea there.
Yeah. So if Eddie Van Halen didn't really pioneer the full use of a Floyd system, because he only just pushed it down, who did?
Well, the guy I think about is Steve Vai. There was a
you don't think anybody before '84 or '5, whenever he kind of really came into it.
Well, let's say first of all, all these things are still being pioneered. And
Yeah,
I'm going to go back to what I said about Hendrix. Is if you or I plug into a wah pedal and a fuzz face to a Marshall with a Strat, we're not pioneering, that combination the way that Hendrix did, right? But that doesn't mean that we couldn't use that setup and pioneer music in some other way.
right.
Okay. So first of all, let me say that it's not like the Floyd Rose or the tremolo bar is not a done deal. There's still room for generations upon generations to develop it. But Steve Vai, there was a guitar magazine, and I want to say it was like 1985 or '86, and it featured Steve Vai, and what he had done is actually, you know how you get like the Ibanez's right now or whatever. It'll be a Floyd, and they've recessed the body.
Right.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure Steve Vai invented that recess the body idea, because on that he used very light strings, and on that it was like cheap vinyl like you'd find in a magazine. But the kids today aren't going to know what we're talking about. But you remember
right.
the back with cereal box. There's a record there, or in a guitar magazine. The thing about that record is that what Steve Vai was doing was pulling up on the bar, which that alone, I wouldn't be calling him like the pioneer of this, but like I said, he had actually cut into the body of his guitar, the front of the guitar, so that he could pull up further. And then he was also bending with the left hand, so you hear like perfect fifths bent. And I don't know of anyone that had recorded such wide, upward bends with the tremolo bar as Steve Vai did at that point. So I definitely put him down. Jeff Beck uses a stock tremolo, and I'm just going to say, there are subjective elements to music, believe it or not. And I'm going to tell you that Jeff Beck, to me, he makes it sing, I think, more than anybody. And there's people that make wider bends.
Yeah.
But to me, he's the guy for the tremolo bar in general.
Yeah. Like sometimes I hear from people that to kind of completely get off the subject and then come right back to what we're talking about. I've heard people like, do aliens exist and stuff? And I'm always like, Steve Vai exists.
Absolutely.
Like that's proof that, there's more in the universe than human intelligence.
Absolutely. I agree with you 100%. And, whether we openly meet up with those aliens during our lifetime or not, I can't say that. Although
I met Steve a couple times.
There you go. But if you want to talk about like aliens literally from another planet, of course there are. The universe seems pretty big.
Right.
Yeah, Steve Vai is a really inspirational guy. The other thing I want to say, if there was one, I was talking with somebody earlier today about somebody saying, "Oh, this person is very gifted." What they were saying was that Tom Brady was not the most gifted quarterback, but he was the best. And I responded, "I don't care about gifts. What I care about is vision and relentless hard work or determination." And that's one thing we got to say about Steve Vai is clearly not only did he have determination, but he had determination and focus at a very, very young age,
Yeah.
So when we see that much determination in a person, of course, on some level, we think this person must be from Mars, right? So that's the way I feel about Steve Vai.
Yeah. At the beginning of the whole coronavirus thing, did you see the video that he did where he did like the 2 or 3 separate bends and stuff?
Yes, yeah. He did a whole series of, what, actually, I'll tell you something that made me very, I'll point something out about those Steve Vai videos. And I use the term determination. Okay. I'm going to go backwards a little bit.
Yeah.
Actually, I'm going to take a moment. I'm going to plug my channel because there's a video that you could see there.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
let's go like that. Okay, so the top one, youtube.com/Steve Marchena. There's also my website there. The reason I'm showing you the YouTube channel, though, I took a class with Steve Vai through Berkeley Online, 2018, 2019, right in there. And about the videos. Okay, he actually, for the class, there was a problem with his camera or his lighting setup, where if you go to my channel and you find, it's like My Lesson with Steve Vai, it's like he's a ghost. There's no, it's just, you can hear his voice, you can clearly, he plays guitar, so you can clearly tell this is Steve Vai. Having said that, he recognized there was a problem there. He said, okay, well, you know, I'm gonna have, he named some guy that worked at his studio. He's like, I'm gonna have Eric take a look at that. But those videos, initially at the beginning of the coronavirus, Steve Vai's audio was not that great. It wasn't. And he knew it wasn't that great because he responded. And he's like, why didn't you guys tell me? But this is the point. Within a few weeks, his audio was outstanding. So maybe if somebody starts out and the first thing they do is amazing, great. But that's not what's interesting to me. You know what I mean? I'm willing to see what somebody does. If they have vision, they have determination. But yeah, absolutely. You're talking about Steve Vai. The other thing I tell you, I had to work for his class on this circular vibrato. Joe, have you ever tried? So there's this concept. A rock vibrato is going to go from the ceiling to the floor, and a classical vibrato is going to go wall to wall.
Side to side, right.
Steve Vai he literally does a circle. He's doing, man, I worked on that enough that I could, you know, pass a test. But in terms of actually working that in my playing, yeah, that's proof that Steve Vai is an alien. Let me ask you this. Have you tried that circular vibrato?
I have, and I'm one of those guitar players that staunchly traditional. And, you know, like, as much as I like Steve Vai's playing and everything, I have no desire to really emulate any of that. You know, I have my hands full just trying to do, you know, Ritchie Blackmore, Jimmy Page stuff.
But it's fun, you know? Fun to try this stuff out, because until you try it out, you really won't know how it's going to resonate with you. You know,
right?
So
right.
Jimmy Page, Ritchie Blackmore, I get that 100%. But Joe, I know you. I know that any of these techniques, you'll dabble with them, and then you may find a technique that you never use. That's fun, man. Especially we're getting older now. When you're getting older and you try out a technique that you've never done before, and you can incorporate it, man, it makes life worth living, man. Guitar technique makes life worth living. That's the way. Yeah.
Yes. So I know you did some stuff with Steve Vai, like you said, when you went back to school, which is amazing. Like, to decide to say, hey, I'm going to go back to school. I mean, that's like unbelievable. But what was one thing that you learned from Steve Vai that really stuck out to you? Just one thing.
Okay.
I know you like to expound on a lot of things. One thing.
One thing. I'm going to make a point about the thing. I've heard people critical of Steve Vai using the term like over the top. And then other terms like whammy bar abuse. I even remember a guitar magazine at one point when somebody, like, it was letters to the editor, and the letter said something to the effect of, like, you know, if Steve Vai doesn't stop using that whammy bar, I'm going to shove it up his. Okay, so I just want to say it's polarizing, but there's something that Steve Vai pointed out about all of that and how he likes to use it that makes it way more effective. And this is what it is. If you're going to play a melody or a lick and you're going to ornament it, whether that means, you know, going crazy with the Floyd Rose or playing it in harmonics or any type of ornamentation, his thing is play it in a very plain way first, right? So that one's pretty big. And the concept is, like, I'll say this, a lot of electric guitar players are completely addicted to vibrato. And at every note they, you know, maybe not every note they play, but whenever they're going to sustain a note, they'll always vibrato it. And that becomes predictable. And it's also, if you, in doing that, it means that if you do want to go over the top with the vibrato, it's not quite as effective because the vibrato has always been, it's almost like, I'll make an analogy here, like some of the Friday the 13th movies, I get it. When people get killed, that's scary. But if you're doing that from the beginning to the end, and you don't go 5 minutes without Jason and some sort of chainsaw or axe, you're not building suspense at all. So that's I'm gonna file with Steve Vai. You said one thing. This concept, building suspense, that if you have something in your arsenal, whether that's playing fast or playing legato or whammy bar or abuse or anything like that, the way you do it, you set it up, by playing whatever you're going to play twice, and the first time you don't ornament it, then you introduce the ornamentation, and in that way, well, Joe, it's almost like when if there's a band you never heard before and they play a cover tune that you're familiar with, it kind of takes the composition part out of the equation, where you can just pay attention to like what's going on with this band's sound, what's going on with their time feel, because you already know you like the song, right? So in the same way, if you play a melody, no vibrato at all, especially no vibrato on the last note, just play it and let it ring out. Then you play it again and people are like, oh, I've heard this melody before. So it's taking that melody out of the equation. Then whatever you want to do, tap with the pick one fret above the note you're playing, whatever it's going to highlight that in a different way. So that's one of my favorite things. And I'll tell you, it's difficult when you say one thing, Steve, I can't resist. You said one thing, but can I add a little point that he made to me that I'm going to say changed my life?
Yeah.
So he gave me a sideways compliment. He says, because, okay, just the nature of who I am, in addition to the assignments that we had, I also decided, because there was some leeway in how we presented the assignment, I'm going, okay, this particular assignment for his class, I'm going to, I'll play it on my jazz guitar. And I'm going to play something like Wes. I'll play your tune, Steve Vai, but I'm going to add some octaves and some jazz chords. And then I'll play another one. I'm going to play For the Love of God, but I'm going to use like a country B-bender when I do it. I'll tell you this, I felt really clever when I was doing it. But I'll tell you what he said to me he says, it sounds like you've spent decades working to play all these styles of music authentically. Stop. Now start trying to play those styles like you. And I got to tell you that, when I think about, if you're talking about jazz, I think it's like Wes Montgomery or Charlie Christian or Django Reinhardt, of course, I'd spend a lot of time trying to assimilate what they did. But he sent this message to me that if I keep doing that, I'm going to run out of time. I'm never going to assimilate everything that they did. And then I will have not spent my life working on playing things that I do that nobody else does, right? So here's a great point that Steve Vai made. Yeah, Steve Vai is a deep topic. Here's one thing he said, is if you're playing a style of music that you're not familiar with, and you play something that you think is inappropriate for the style of music, that's your voice. So if you're playing country music and you play some quirky bend, you're like, nobody plays that in country. That means that you should play that when you're playing country music. So in that way, he moved me away from this, I don't want to call it a concept of authenticity, but that's kind of what it is. Is this idea that Joe, we're getting old, man. And it's in that way, it's like, you mentioned like Jimmy Page and Richie Blackmore. And it's like, maybe at this point in our lives, we've invested enough time assimilating the history, and now it's the time to pioneer a new history. This is the thing, Picasso. I know this happened with Picasso. He went to art school, and it wasn't like it wasn't a good art school, but he recognized life is too short, and it's not that I'm done learning, but I'm done studying what others have done. Now I know what other people have done. I also can then figure out like something that other people haven't done, and that's what I want. So that in that way, he really changed my trajectory. It's not that I won't study what other players have played, but it's not as important to me now as the way, which goes back to the pandemic thing. I recognized at the very beginning of the pandemic that like the whole thing is horrible. It's a nightmare. But if I want to go for that silver lining, it put musicians in a position we've never been in before, because musicians have been in pandemics before, but they didn't have the internet, Joe, right? So that way, it's the first time in human history, and well, I'm proud of both of us that we are on the cutting edge of that stuff, and so there you go. That's the glass is half full. Is what I just did.
Yeah, exactly. Yes, yeah. So a lot of things for you, because obviously I know you. We go way back to high school.
Yes.
Although you went to a different high school than me, but a lot of things have changed for you in this past year.
Oh yeah.
You're now vegan or vegetarian? I'm not sure the term.
I'm vegetarian.
Yeah.
I don't eat anything that had a face. That's. So yeah, I'll tell the story about that, and again, it may give some insight into. Listen, my friend Penny, Penny, Penny played on your album. Am I right about that?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
And Tailstop and everything. Sure.
What an amazing drummer.
And I don't know if you remember, years ago, we did, we've done shows in the past, Sex and Witchcraft.
And Blue Steel.
Yes.
Yes, of course.
And Penny was in that, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, where were we going with that? About
vegetarian.
Vegetarian. Thank you. Penny likes to point out that I'm like, I'll go to extremes, and she'll talk about shades of gray. Shades of gray. That's not my strength. I'm looking for kind of extreme truths in one direction, and I'll tend to go with that. So with that in mind, I'll tell you what happened on December. I want to make sure I say this date right. December 21st. I was eating a steak. I got to admit to you that I probably all my life have eaten too much red meat, just because I really liked it. It was delicious, right? But I was eating a steak, and I took a bite of a steak, and it felt like it went down the wrong tube. Like if you drink water and
right.
Yeah. It felt like it went down the wrong tube, and I said, well, I'll take a sip. I was drinking like a Diet Pepsi, and I took the sip, and I just want to describe what happened because it was horrible. First of all, as it started going down, something did not feel right about it.
Yeah.
The pressure was off. I know that now, like in my esophagus,
mm-hmm.
pressure was off. And it went down for about 8 seconds, and then I felt a terrible pain, and then it took less than a second for that Pepsi to come right back up. So now I'm going to skip a bunch of details. I figured because of the coronavirus, I did not want to go to a hospital. Did not want to go to. And I went almost 24 hours where, I tried drinking a little water. I throw it up. I have like a little yogurt. I throw everything I tried to ingest. I threw up, and I'd say that it was getting more painful. And I kind of, you put 2 and 2 together. Humans aren't going to survive much more than 3 days without water.
Right.
I had gone a day. So, long story short, I went to the hospital, and they put an instrument down my throat that had a camera and a knife. And they found this piece of steak. What had happened is it had gotten stuck at the bottom of my esophagus, like just ready to go into my stomach, but not quite. And then because it was stuck there, my esophagus had become inflamed.
Mm-hmm.
And it was completely locked in there. And they had to cut that piece of steak in half, and then they pulled half of it up and let the other half go down. Now, here's the thing, Joe. That could have happened with broccoli or anything, but it didn't.
Yeah. And
I'll own this. Sometimes I'll focus on one thing so much I can be really oblivious to things. It's just I'm aware of it. But that does mean that if I do pick up on a hint from the universe, I'll take that hint. Okay. So 10 years ago, I went up in the hospital. The antibiotics didn't work because I worn my immune system down with drugs, alcohol, tobacco. So that made me quit all of that. So again, this goes back. I'll go to extremes. So in this instance, I figured that piece of steak tried to kill me. And so, I'm a vegetarian now. It took a little time just figuring out foods that I'd like.
Right.
But hey, I did, and I have to tell you, overall, I feel like I have more energy now that I'm not eating. You know, they talk about a meat coma, Joe, right?
Yes.
Like, yeah,
Yeah.
I never have anything like that. So yeah, it
Yeah.
feels good. Yeah.
Okay. But you know, there's nothing wrong with that. It's definitely healthier as long as you're staying up with certain needs like protein and things like that.
Bingo. So I'm going to point some things out. One is I don't like tofu, and that's a
Yeah.
staple of vegetarians. Rice and beans have I know this, that there's amino acids that you actually need to digest any food, right?
Yeah.
And the catch is, like, meat is a great source of amino acids. Some
Right.
of the amino acids your body can produce on its own, but not all of them. What I
Right.
do know is the combination of rice
And beans.
you have all the amino acids. So
Right.
and there's protein there.
Right.
And then also, I take they make multivitamins that are specifically for vegetarians and multivitamins that are specifically for vegans. So I'll tell you some things I do eat. I still eat eggs.
Yeah.
Which is an amazing source of protein. What else is even cheese, dairy. I'll
Cheese.
eat. Yeah. So there's some sources of protein there with the vitamin and the rice and beans and, like I said, eggs and dairy. Yeah, I feel pretty good with it.
Yeah. Awesome.
There's speaking of vegetarian and Eddie Van Halen, I'm going to tie them together. There's a famous photograph of David Lee Roth and Eddie Van Halen in front
with
of
the hamburgers.
but
Yes.
they're not. Take a look at, because Eddie Van Halen has
Filet of fish.
Filet of fish.
Yes.
And I wouldn't eat the fish now at this point, but I'll take it. You know what I mean? He uses a Floyd Rose. Well, he uses a Floyd Rose Live. I'll use a stock tremolo. Eddie Van Halen, man, we're not going to have, in my opinion, another musician in our lifetime that is going to mean to our generation, Joe, what Eddie Van Halen did. That was it, man. It's like, I guess at the minimum, I could say once in a generation, somebody would, affect people that way.
Yeah. Okay. So, we've been going for like over a half hour now. And we could keep going. You're always very interesting to talk to.
Come on my channel. Let's do an interview with you on my channel. Do you want to do that?
Sure.
We'll set it up and then we can, because you're right. There's a lot we can talk about here.
Right. Okay. So I have one last question for you.
Yeah.
So, you just mentioned Eddie Van Halen, big influence on both of us. What's the one thing that you think was his biggest contribution to music? Just one single thing.
That's so hard. That's so hard. Right away, when you say that, my brain goes two different places. But okay, I'm going to go back to what Steve Vai said to me, because it all makes sense now, especially when you asked me that question. Yeah, Eddie Van Halen certainly, he copied Eric Clapton, Ritchie Blackmore, all different players. But where he primarily put his energy was figuring out things that he could do with the guitar that hadn't been done before. And, again, I was 48. I was 48 when Steve Vai pointed out. I said I could be oblivious. He's like, "Hey, Steve, you're spending all your time playing other things people have played before." He's like, "Stop." Well, Eddie Van Halen had that built into him, So I'm going to say, his number one contribution, were it not for Eddie Van Halen, we might have said that by the late 1970s, electric guitar technique, had been developed.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Yeah, because there was certainly a vocabulary that everybody other than Eddie Van Halen was relying on, right? And there was variation in style within that, but he, his willingness to throw out the rule book Another guy I really like that I'll want to just honorable mention here, Tom Morello from Rage Against the Machine,
Yeah.
Be a Slave. He's another. What he did is different than what Eddie Van Halen did, but there was some of that same pioneering spirit where it's pretty obvious to me that Tom Morello didn't spend decades and decades saying like, oh, I have to be able to play exactly what Django Reinhardt did or what Eddie Van Halen did. So I'm gonna, blaze my own. Is this freewheeling?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm gonna go freewheeling. All right. I'm gonna blaze my own trail. I'd say here's a story about Miles Davis. I know that when Miles Davis was a kid, he was taking a trumpet lesson, and on his own, he had heard another trumpet player that was using a lot of vibrato, like an extreme wide vibrato. And so Miles was warming up for his lesson, and he's like, I'm going to copy this guy. And his teacher said something to him of like, whoever that trumpet player was, he's like, that trumpet, it wasn't Dizzy, but it's like, if it was, Dizzy Gillespie already played that. The world doesn't need you to play that. Right? The world needs you to figure out what you're going to contribute. So with that in mind, tying that into Eddie Van Halen, Miles Davis was lucky enough to have an influence when he was young that, of course, you have to learn the rules to break them, but it's the learning the rules isn't the important part. It's breaking them. And certainly that's Eddie Van Halen did that across the board. Miles Davis did that across the board. It's amazing to me because Miles Davis really didn't use vibrato at all on any recording. Because he didn't do that, his sense of pitch and nuance in the pitch, it's amazing. It's amazing. So
yeah. Okay. Well, very interesting. Very interesting. So definitely, we'll set something up and we'll do this again.
Absolutely. I'll send you an email when we're done. We'll figure out the best date. We'll do one on, and hey, you know what? We both want to get more subscribers. So we're telling anybody that's watching this, please go subscribe to Joe's YouTube channel.
Yes.
And please subscribe to mine.
And yours, absolutely.
And we'll, I'll send you an email as soon as we're done and we'll find the best date. We can do this over on my channel.
Sure. Absolutely.
Awesome. Joe, thank you so much.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Bye now.
See you. Bye-bye.